Did you know that it's never too late to start a new career, as long as you're willing to show up, try new things, and see where life takes you? Hi Russ, how are you today?
Good to see you, Lori.
So good to see you. Can I join you?
Absolutely. Have a seat.
Well, thank you for joining us again for Orrville Works. Today we're with Russ Yoder, who is the administrator at BrennField Nursing Center. So Russ, how are things at BrennField? I hear that you have a new position, just recently into the administrator position.
I'm just finishing my first week, Lori, and it's been a wild ride, but I'm really excited to be there. I love the place. I love the people. Staff has responded extremely well to my overtures at leadership.
Okay.
And I'm looking forward to the days to come.
So well, we're glad to have you in town. I know that you didn't start your career in Orrville. You're kind of a new employee here in our community. Where did things start for you? How did you get to where you are today?
Actually, I was in Orrville about 10 years ago, working as a vice president, general manufacturer of Train Corporation on East Lincoln Way.
Okay.
But going back way beyond that, my roots are in Northeast Ohio, and I was raised, at least through the 5th grade of elementary school in Stark County, a little town called Louisville. There are a lot of similarities between Louisville and Orrville insofar as they are near larger towns, in Louisville's case, Canton, but it has its own identity. And one of the things I've really come to appreciate about Orrville is that it has its very own distinct identity and culture. And I'm enjoying learning all about that and being welcomed by the people here. At the end of the 5th grade, my family did something a little unconventional back in the 1960s and picked up stakes, sold everything they had, and moved us to a place no one had ever heard of, Zambia, Africa. So I spent all my middle school years in a very different culture, different environment entirely, and that actually set the stage, I think, for a life of being ready to jump in and just acclimate myself, on a spur of a moment,
Sure.
Without reservation.
Yep.
And so I can be pretty comfortable any place in the world as a result. And some time in Texas, some time in California, all of which has given me a tremendous appreciation for Northeast Ohio and for this area in particular. And so when I had the opportunity, and going back to my military days, I joined the Army at 17 at the tail end of the Vietnam War. And because the war was winding down, I actually found myself with orders to Germany and functioned as a German linguist for the United States Army. Capitalizing on that, coming back to the States, I eventually found a position in management with Luke. And spent my first 17 years there. So that is the initial draw to Wayne County, but it was so close to Stark County,
Sure.
It was a very easy transition.
So you started in manufacturing.
Started in manufacturing. My roots are in manufacturing, cut my teeth there.
So after you left Luke, what was your next opportunity?
Next opportunity was with the Certified Angus Beef Program.
Okay. Again, in management?
Yes, I was a director of what's now known as brand assurance. It was then known as trademark compliance, and terrific opportunity to work under Brent Eicher. Then, as a result of the recession, I found myself on the street. And this was a really, really tough period of time in many respects, but it's given me perspective on life that I wouldn't trade. But I found myself in my mid-50s with a sterling work history and performance reviews, but virtually unemployable. And I was quickly dismissed. Any place I went with, well, you're overqualified. And that was difficult.
Because you wanted to work.
I wanted to work. I'm geared to work. In the last 44 years, I've missed one day of work. So it's very unnatural to have looking for a job be your full-time position.
Right.
But I know what that feels like. When the recession comes to you personally, it's actually a depression. It was during that time that I knew I had to retool. This is the 21st century. I couldn't rely on the things, the degrees. I had my master's in management from the 90s, but it wasn't enough to prepare me for the emerging workforce opportunities. And so I tried to ascertain my strengths and where those opportunities might lie. And I've always had an interest, not necessarily in medicine. I never wanted to be a doctor. I never enjoyed chemistry that much in high school. But I've always had an interest in gerontology. And I thought, well, and of course I like people.
Sure.
And so how can I merge my business background with that interest in gerontology? Yes, nursing home administration. So I steeled myself to get through the training program, sat for the license. It's not something you wake up in the morning and the next day, you have it in hand. It's very much a process. And because of that, I had so much time and energy invested, I didn't want to let that license lapse. So it was an additional 7 years until 6 years until I had the opportunity to exercise that license here in Orrville with BrennField.
You have certainly had a wealth of experience jumping in at all sorts of different opportunities, but still having that desire to work and to find
Absolutely.
the things that interest you and that work with your passion to be a people person, and then looking at what your next role would be. So we're glad to see you land at BrennField. So tell us a little bit about what's going on at the BrennField Nursing Center.
Well, I think BrennField is unique in a lot of ways. There are a lot of nursing facilities across the area. We are a standalone, independent facility started by a couple back in the mid-1970s, Don and Jean Stepfield, and another man and his wife, Richard Brenneman. Mr. Brenneman was the administrator for the first 20 years. His wife, I believe, was director of nursing, and the Stepfields were the financial backers. Okay. And their daughter today is the owner, along with her husband. And they live in Canton, but we report to them, not to a corporate board. So that means the decisions are made locally, and the outlook is long term. And I think that's very healthy. We want to do what we can, and they've endeavored very hard to preserve that independence. But as the regulatory environment becomes ever more onerous, it's more difficult to be a standalone facility. There are lives, there are families who are dependent on that facility, and we want to do our best to provide for them and provide skilled nursing 24/7 in the Orrville area in a town and country setting. We are on the edge of town, but we also have a campus of 65 acres. So you look out over the horizon, and you're into farmland. But right on the edge of town, so you can be down here within 5 minutes, and I think it's a great situation geographically.
So, what are some of the characteristics you look for in your staff, your medical staff?
Well, they need to be competent. Yes, that's a given. They have to have the credentials recognized by the state of Ohio. But by the same token, I want that extra dimension. I want them to really demonstrate that they care for people, and that's something you can't fake. It's going to come out sooner or later under the pressures of the day as to whether you really are there just for the position, or you consider this to be your home, and the residents become your family.
Right.
And the residents' families sense that too. And over time, we all get pretty close. So, we have a number of different therapies available. The idea of rehabilitation for those who come to us for that. But whatever the need is, we want to make sure that we get that individual functioning to his or her highest level, and we do that with competent, caring staff. And so my objective is to make sure that turnover is as low as possible, and then we do the right things to make people want to stay with us and want to be part of that environment.
So looking back over your own job history, the challenges that you have now as an administrator working with a staff, what would be some advice you would give to someone who's just starting out in the world of work? What would you say to encourage them?
It sounds too elementary, I imagine, but just show up, be there. I can't stress the importance of attendance and reliability. And if there's any one particular trait that I'm looking for in an employee, it's being able to count on them day to day. When you're working 3 shifts, it is different from manufacturing. I've run 2 shifts in manufacturing, but not 3. I've been part of that, of course, when I was at Luke, which was a 24-hour operation. But when people's lives depend on what you do, and there's holes in the schedule, you really do a disservice to yourself and the organization.
Everything about your life isn't work. Tell me some of the things that you like to do when you're not working.
Well, I suppose the most salient things that comes to mind, it's pretty unconventional, but I'm a pilot. I come from a family of aviators. My grandfather not only got his pilot's license before World War II, but he built an airport immediately following the war in Louisville, Yoder Airport. And my dad was the last manager there up until 2010 at the age of 80, and still a pilot himself. I took a little different route, and it took me a while to get into aviation because nothing really clicked for me until the eve of my 40th birthday here X number of years ago.
Sure.
And my wife sent me up with a gentleman who eventually taught me how to fly. Open cockpit.
Okay. That's exciting.
Totally open.
Sure.
So I fly 2-place ultralights, which are classified by the Federal Aviation Administration as an airplane because it has more than one seat. But it looks pretty much like a lawnmower with wings. There's no floor, there's no ceiling, there's no plexiglass. You have the stick and some instruments, and the great wide open spaces, beneath you, God's creation from a little higher perspective, and it's something that's so exhilarating. I've never really gotten over, and it's the closest that I can come to flying like Superman.
We have a very interesting story. I'm so glad that we had an opportunity to get to know each other a little better and to hear more about your work experience, and certainly enjoy hearing about your piloting. So that's an exciting career or hobby for you. So thank you for joining us. Once again, this is Lori Reinbold with Orrville Works.
My name is Russ Yoder, and I'm administrator at BrennField Nursing Center here in Orrville. Orrville works for me because from the perspective that I have, having lived in a lot of different places on several different continents, I recognize when I land on a place that's a winner.